The studio lights were blazing that morning, casting a warm, golden glow over the set of The View as Dolly Parton settled into the guest chair. The country music icon, resplendent in a stunning sequin jacket that caught the light and scattered it back like tiny fireworks, radiated her characteristic warmth. Her hair was perfectly coiffed, her makeup flawless, and that unmistakable smile, the one that had graced 1,000 album covers and warmed millions of hearts, was firmly in place. She'd been looking forward to this appearance, especially since The View had a massive audience that might not typically listen to country music. Her new children's album was near and dear to her heart, and her Imagination Library program, which had given over 200 million books to children around the world, was a cause she was passionate about sharing. But something felt different today. The energy in the room was tense, charged with an undercurrent of hostility that Dolly couldn't quite identify. The crew moved with unusual stiffness, exchanging nervous glances. The producers huddled in the corner, whispering urgently. And Joy Behar, seated at the main desk with her co-hosts, seemed unusually agitated, even before the cameras started rolling. She shuffled through her notes with visible irritation, her jaw tight, her eyes darting around the studio like she was searching for something to pounce on. Dolly noticed it immediately. She'd been in this business long enough to read a room, and this room was screaming trouble. Dolly arrived early, as she always did, exchanging pleasantries with the crew, signing a few autographs, and offering genuine compliments to everyone she met. She asked the stagehands about their families, remembered the name of the makeup artist's dog, and charmed the production assistants with stories from her latest tour. It was effortless for her, this kindness. It wasn't performance. It was simply who she was. But as she settled into the guest chair, she caught Joy's eye across the studio, and what she saw there made her stomach tighten. Joy wasn't looking at her with curiosity or respect. She was looking at her like she was prey. The show's theme music faded, and the cameras rolled. Whoopi Goldberg offered the standard warm welcome, her voice smooth and professional, but there was already an undercurrent of tension that seemed to emanate specifically from Joy's direction. She had that look in her eyes, the one that regular viewers knew meant she was ready to stir the pot, to manufacture controversy where none existed, to create headlines at the expense of her guest's dignity. Dolly smiled warmly at the camera, waved to the audience, and settled in for what she hoped would be a pleasant conversation. The conversation started on safe ground. The co-hosts discussed various topics, and Dolly shared her thoughts with her characteristic warmth and humor. She talked about her new album, her upcoming projects, and her thoughts on the music industry. She was engaging, thoughtful, and gracious, exactly what viewers had come to expect from her. She spoke about her Imagination Library program with such passion that the audience sat spellbound. She described growing up in poverty in the Smoky Mountains, with 12 siblings and a family that couldn't afford books. She recalled how her mother would read to them from the Bible, how stories became their escape, their education, their lifeline. She talked about the importance of literacy, about how books had saved her as a child, and how she'd made it her life's mission to ensure no child ever went without a book to call their own. The audience was captivated, hanging on every word. This was Dolly Parton at her best, authentic, humble, and inspiring. But then Joy leaned in, not aggressively, not loudly, but with that unmistakable shift. There was a subtle tightening of her posture, a slight tilt of her head that signaled she was no longer listening, only preparing to speak. "So, Dolly," Joy said, her tone casual but edged with something that sounded suspiciously like contempt. "You've been doing this a long time." Dolly smiled, still warm, still gracious. "I have." "Yes," Joy nodded slowly, letting the silence stretch just a beat too long. "Decades, really. Different eras, different audiences. And yet somehow you've never really changed your image." A pause. Not long enough to interrupt, but long enough to feel intentional. The air in the studio seemed to thicken. Dolly blinked once, still smiling, but her eyes had sharpened slightly. "Well," she said lightly, her Tennessee drawl softening the edge. "I've always believed if you know who you are, you don't need to chase every trend." The audience murmured approvingly. Whoopi nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. But Joy didn't smile back. Instead, she leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "But don't you think," she continued, her voice dripping with false curiosity, "that there's something performative about that consistency? I mean, big hair, sparkles, the exaggerated femininity. Some people might say it's a little outdated. A little calculated." The temperature in the studio shifted dramatically. Whoopi glanced sideways, her expression unreadable but her eyes flashing a warning. Sarah Haynes adjusted her papers, suddenly finding them fascinating. Sunny Hostin stared at her hands, her face a careful mask of neutrality. The audience, sensing the shift, fell silent. Dolly didn't move. She didn't stiffen, didn't raise her voice, didn't even let the smile leave her face. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, as if considering the question with genuine thoughtfulness. "Well, Joy," she said gently, her voice carrying that unmistakable warmth that had made her a legend. "I've always thought femininity wasn't something to be ashamed of. It's just one way of being strong. I grew up in a time when women were told to be small, to be quiet, to fit into boxes that other people built for them. I decided early on that I wasn't going to fit into anyone's box. I was going to build my own. And if that means sparkles and big hair, well, that's just who I am." Joy's lips pressed together into a thin line. She wasn't getting the reaction she wanted. "Sure," she said, her voice clipped. "But don't you worry that younger women see that and think success means looking a certain way? That being taken seriously requires all the glitter and the fake lashes and the, what do you call it? The Dollyisms?" The words hung there like a poison cloud. Not an outright attack, but not a compliment either. It was a dismissal dressed up as concern, a belittlement disguised as a question. Dolly's fingers rested calmly against each other on her knee, her nails perfectly manicured, tapping once softly against the fabric of her skirt. "I think young women are smart enough to decide for themselves," she replied, her voice still gentle but carrying an unmistakable steel beneath it. "I trust them more than I trust labels. I trust them to know that success isn't about how you look or what you wear. It's about what's in your heart and what you're willing to fight for." A ripple of applause moved through the audience. Whoopi smiled openly now, clearly approving. But Joy leaned back, crossing her arms defensively. "I'm just saying," she added, her tone dismissive. "You've built a brand, and brands can sometimes distract from substance. It's easy to hide behind a persona when the questions get hard." That was the moment. Not when the words landed, but when Dolly realized exactly how they were meant to land. This wasn't curiosity. It wasn't dialogue. It was a slow, calculated erosion, a deliberate attempt to diminish everything she'd built, everything she was. Dolly looked directly at Joy for the first time, truly looked at her. Not with anger, not with defiance, but with a clarity that seemed to pierce right through the studio lights. "Well," she said softly, her voice carrying a weight that silenced the room. "I reckon substance speaks for itself." Her tone was still kind, still controlled, but something had shifted, and Joy noticed it immediately. The audience felt it too, a collective intake of breath, a sudden awareness that this was no longer a simple interview. This was a confrontation. Joy smiled faintly, as if satisfied she'd finally found traction, as if she'd been waiting for this exact moment. "Of course," Joy replied, her voice honeyed with false innocence. "I just think it's worth examining. After all, you've been doing this for 40 years. Surely you've had moments where you wondered if it was all worth it, if the persona was worth the price." Dolly nodded once, slowly, thoughtfully. "Then examine away," she said, her voice steady as a mountain. "I've lived my life in the open. I've sung my songs, told my stories, and stood by my values. I've got nothing to hide. But I'll tell you one thing, Joy. There's a difference between examining and judging, between questioning and dismissing. And I've been in this business long enough to know the difference." The audience applauded again, this time louder, more sustained. Joy didn't join in. She only adjusted her mug, her eyes fixed on Dolly with a laser focus, as if she was already planning what to say next, how to land the next blow. And Dolly, still smiling, still composed, had no idea yet that this was only the beginning. Then came the question that would change everything. Joy leaned forward, her eyes narrowing with that familiar gleam of someone about to deliver what she thought was a killing blow. The studio light seemed to dim slightly, or maybe it was just the sudden intensity of the moment. "Dolly, let me ask you something," Joy said, her voice dripping with false concern. "You've spent your whole career being sweet, being likable, being everyone's favorite country aunt. But isn't that just a performance? A carefully constructed image designed to sell albums and concert tickets? I mean, come on. The wig, the nails, the exaggerated accent. It's a lot, isn't it? And what about your song Jolene? Some people say it's anti-feminist. Begging another woman not to take your man? That's not exactly empowering, is it?" The accusation was delivered with Joy's typical bluntness, but this time she had clearly crossed a line. Dolly's eyes flashed with something that went beyond mere annoyance. This was personal now. This was an attack on everything she'd built, everything she'd overcome, everything she'd sacrificed. She'd spent her entire career being dismissed by people who thought they knew better. She'd been told she was too country, too simple, too nice. She'd been underestimated her entire life, dismissed as just another pretty face with a big voice and bigger hair. And she'd always proven her critics wrong. She'd built an empire, a legacy, a fortune, all while maintaining her integrity, her values, and her kindness. But Joy Behar wasn't just underestimating her. She was attacking her character, her integrity, her very identity. She was reducing a 60-year career to a costume and a punchline. But Dolly didn't raise her voice. She didn't get flustered. She didn't give Joy the satisfaction of losing her composure. Instead, she leaned forward, her eyes steady and calm, her voice carrying that unmistakable Tennessee warmth that had made her a legend. When she spoke, every word was measured, deliberate, and devastating. "Joy," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper but carrying through the silent studio like a bell. "Let me tell you something. I didn't spend a lifetime writing songs about real people and real pain to be told how I'm allowed to feel. I didn't grow up in the hollers of Tennessee, with nothing but a dream and a voice, to have some woman in a fancy studio tell me that my art isn't feminist enough. I didn't build a business empire, a charity that gives away millions of books, and a career that spanned 6 decades, to be reduced to a wig and a punchline." She paused, letting the words sink in. The audience was breathless, hanging on every syllable. "You want to talk about the Jolene? That song isn't about begging. It's about vulnerability. It's about the fear of losing someone you love. It's about being human. And if you can't see that, if you can't understand that a woman can be strong and still be afraid, then you don't understand women at all." The words landed like a thunderclap. The audience gasped. Whoopi's eyes went wide. Joy Behar's face drained of color, then flushed red with anger. For perhaps the first time in her career on The View, she was completely, utterly speechless. But Dolly wasn't finished. "You sit here behind your fancy desk with your fancy microphone," she continued, her voice still calm but carrying a steel edge that made the studio feel like it was vibrating. "And you think you know what's best for everyone. You think you can judge who's real and who's fake, who's worthy and who's not. But you don't know what it's like to be a little girl in Tennessee who had nothing but a dream and a voice. You don't know what it's like to work your whole life to build something meaningful, only to have someone tear it down because it doesn't fit their narrow view of what a successful woman should look like. You don't know what it's like to face rejection, poverty, and prejudice, and still get up every day and sing your heart out because that's the only thing that makes sense." She paused again, her eyes never leaving Joy's. "So let me be very clear, Joy. I don't need your approval. I never did. And I never will. I've been dismissed by people who thought they knew better my entire life, and I've always proven them wrong. You're not the first, and you won't be the last. But you will remember this moment. You will remember that a woman from the Smoky Mountains, with her big hair and her sparkles and her fake accent, stood up to you and told you the truth. And you won't forget it." The studio was deathly quiet. You could hear a pin drop. The audience was staring, wide-eyed, at the scene unfolding before them. Whoopi Goldberg's face was a mask of shock and barely concealed alarm. Sarah Haynes looked like she wanted to crawl under the table. Sunny Hostin was staring at her hands, her lips pressed together in a thin line. And Joy Behar, for perhaps the first time in her career on The View, was completely speechless. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Her eyes were wide, her face pale, her hands trembling slightly on the desk. She looked like she'd been hit by a truck. But Joy Behar was not someone who stayed quiet for long, especially when she felt cornered. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity, and then she exploded. "How dare you?" she shouted, her voice cracking with fury. "How dare you come into my studio, sit on my set, and lecture me about anything? You think you're so special, Dolly? You think you're better than everyone else because you smile and sing and act like you're just a simple country girl? Let me tell you something. You're not special. You're just another celebrity who thinks the rules don't apply to you. You're a brand, a product, a carefully manufactured image. And you know what? I see right through it. I see right through you." Dolly's response was delivered with a calm that was somehow more devastating than any shout could have been. She didn't flinch. She didn't raise her voice. She simply looked at Joy with something that might have been pity, might have been disappointment, might have been both. "Joy," she said softly, "I walked in here with the same respect I show every interview, every journalist, every talk show host I work with. The difference is that they treat their guests with the same respect in return. They ask real questions. They listen to the answers. And they don't use their platform as a weapon to settle personal scores. I came here to talk about my album and my charity. I came here to share something positive with your audience. And you turned it into a personal attack. Personal scores?" Joy was practically screaming now, her voice rising to a pitch that made the crew wince. "What personal score could I possibly have with you? I don't even know you. You're nobody to me. You're just another guest who thinks she's above the rules." Dolly nodded slowly, as if Joy had just proven her point. "Exactly," she said, her voice still calm, still measured. "You don't know me. You don't know my work. You don't know my character. And you don't know what I stand for. But that didn't stop you from attacking me from the moment I sat down. That didn't stop you from making assumptions and hurling accusations. That didn't stop you from turning what should have been a professional interview into a personal vendetta. And that, Joy, is the problem. You don't know me, but you judged me anyway. You don't know my story, but you dismissed it anyway. You don't know my heart, but you broke it anyway." The audience erupted. People were on their feet, clapping, cheering, whistling. It was the kind of moment that happens once in a generation, the kind of moment that gets replayed for years. It was the moment the underdog won, the moment the bully got exactly what she deserved. And Joy Behar, sitting alone at her desk, her face a mask of utter devastation, seemed to realize that she had just lost the battle, the war, and her reputation all in one morning. Then came the moment that would be replayed for years. Joy Behar, completely losing her composure, screamed at the producers, "Stop! Cut this, get her out of my studio." Her voice was ragged, desperate, almost unrecognizable. She ripped off her microphone and threw it onto the desk with such force that it skittered across the surface and nearly fell to the floor. But it was already too late. The cameras were rolling. The moment had been captured. And Dolly Parton, calm and unmoving, delivered the final blow. "You don't get to lecture me about truth while deciding which voices are acceptable," Dolly said, her voice carrying through the chaos with the clarity of a bell. She continued, measured but unwavering, her eyes locked on Joy's. "I didn't spend a lifetime writing songs about real people and real pain to be told how I'm allowed to feel. I'm not here for applause, I'm here because honesty still matters. And honesty, Joy, means telling you that you've been tearing people down for 40 years, and I'm not going to let you do it to me. Not today. Not ever." The audience was on its feet now, the applause deafening. Whoopi tried to salvage the show. "Well," she said, her voice trembling slightly with shock and barely concealed delight. "That was certainly unexpected." But Joy wasn't done. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor with a sound like a scream. "I can't do this," she said, her voice cracking with emotion. "I just can't." Without another word, she turned and stormed off the set, her heels clicking furiously against the floor, leaving behind a studio full of stunned faces and an audience that had just witnessed one of the most humiliating moments in television history. The cameras kept rolling for a few more seconds, capturing the uncomfortable silence, the audience still standing, the co-hosts exchanging helpless glances. Whoopi stared at the empty chair where Joy had been sitting, her expression unreadable. Sarah Haynes covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes wide. Sunny Hostin looked like she'd just witnessed a car crash. And Dolly Parton, the woman at the center of the storm, sat calmly in her chair, her hands folded in her lap, her expression serene. She looked like she'd just done something she'd been waiting 60 years to do. Finally, the floor manager's voice cut through the chaos. "Cut to commercial. Cut to commercial now." But the damage had been done. The moment had been captured on live television, and there was no taking it back. In the aftermath, social media exploded. Dolly Parton, The View, and Honest to Still Matters were trending within minutes. Fans and critics alike weighed in. Some praised Dolly for her courage, for speaking truth to power, for refusing to stay silent in the face of bullying. Others condemned Joy, calling her unprofessional, divisive, and disrespectful. But one thing was clear. Dolly Parton had done what she believed was right. She had stood up for what she believed in. She had defended her legacy, her character, and her art. And she had left the set with her head held high, her dignity intact, and her legend cemented. What did you think about this incredible confrontation? The way Dolly Parton maintained her dignity while exposing Joy Behar's behavior was absolutely masterful. She didn't scream. She didn't name-call. She didn't descend to Joy's level. She simply spoke the truth with such clarity and conviction that it left her adversary with nowhere to hide. And the way Joy Behar stormed off her own show after being completely outclassed was nothing short of poetic justice. It was the moment the bully got exactly what she deserved, and the audience couldn't get enough. If you believe dignity is strength, if you believe standing up for yourself matters, and if you think moments like this deserve to be remembered, tap like to show your support. Subscribe to Rupture for more stories where power shifts on live television. And tell us in the comments, did Dolly do the right thing by standing her ground, or should she have just walked away? We want to hear your thoughts. Drop your comments below, and don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss another explosive moment from the world of entertainment. This is the kind of television that reminds us why we watch, why we care, and why sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is speak the truth. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.